We want to welcome you to a special edition of Eastridge FM. I am your host, Ryan Smith. I'm the Family Life Minister here at the Eastridge Church of Christ in Rockwall, Texas. I have a special honored guest with me today.
That's right.
Today I have Wenzen Chuang, who is one of the shepherds here at Eastridge. Wenzen and I have worked together in the past on a couple of different family-related topics. So where Wenzen has been plugged into our ministry areas is very diverse. But specifically for the purposes of this conversation today, we're going to sit with Wenzen to talk about the financial ramifications of some of what we're experiencing in this culture. We're going to talk a little bit about the world. It's changed a lot. You know, Wenzen, you and I were just talking about this, that a couple of weeks ago, it felt almost novel. So let's push pause and see what's going to happen. And then as things have kind of cascaded here, these financial concerns have gotten way bigger and way worse.
Right. I think initially a lot of folks thought maybe, this lockdown and stay-at-home order would last for maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
4 weeks at the most. And,
Yep.
and now we're hearing it's going to extend on to 6-8 weeks and maybe even longer than that.
That's
and so that obviously brings a lot of concerns to folks in terms of their finances, in terms of income and jobs. And so I think this is a good opportunity for us to talk about how a family ought to kind of prepare for a really extended lockdown and what to do in these really kind of unprecedented times.
Okay. Well, look, with that in mind, first of all, I don't know that we could be doing a topic that is more relevant and that is more directly applicable to families in our current culture. Man, I'm going to hand it to you and let you kind of guide this conversation. I want to speak, as I always do. I'll speak from family health and mental health terms. But man, I want you to kind of get into the nitty gritty here. So what are your recommendations, your words of advice for people in this culture right now, financially?
Sure. There's probably families out there now whose main income person that brings the income in just found out either they've lost their job, been placed on furlough, or maybe given a couple weeks of income and say, hey, this is it, and you got to plan for the future. And so one of the first things I think we ought to think about for folks that are in that situation is kind of just think about what they want to do with their money. Whatever there is, there's going to be a little bit, hopefully some money there that's going to be coming in, and how do you plan for that? And there's really 4 things that I think you ought to prioritize. One is a place to live. You got to think about a place to live, rent, mortgage payments, and so forth. And then the second thing is food. You gotta have food. You got to be able to eat. The third thing is utilities. You got to bring in. You have to keep paying your utilities. You got to keep the lights on. You got to keep the water flowing. And then the last thing is transportation. Make sure make sure you've talked to, if you still have a payment, payment on your vehicle. Make sure you talk to the loan company to discuss. What do you have to do to keep your vehicle so that you can get around.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Prioritizing those things, I think it needs to be at the top of the list. And for the record, it's funny, as I was jotting down what you were saying. Those needs that you're describing, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. As a teacher, I have no doubt that you are.
Yes.
All right.
Heard of that.
So for those people who don't come from education or psychology and who may not be familiar with this, Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs is essentially the very basic version of it is, if your base level needs aren't met, then your upper level needs can't be met either. So
right.
If your base level needs for shelter and food and protection, safety, if those things aren't met first, then the upper level things of love and connection and joy and all that, those can't be met either.
Yeah.
All right. So I say that because something that's been really interesting to me, I think as a culture, and certainly as a church as well, I think we've really wanted to push some of those upper level ideas. That we want families to bond during this time. We want families to connect during this time. And that's true, by the way. That's not an incorrect statement. We absolutely want that to happen. But you just rattled off a bunch of base level needs. I can't ask for a family to bond, and it's hard. I say I can't. It's hard for me to ask for a family to bond or to like grow when they don't know whether there's going to be a roof over their head.
Yeah. So if you're worried about mortgage or rent and being kicked out of your place to live, if you're worried about that, it's really difficult to kind of get into some of those other relational things you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or if you're worried about where the next meal is coming from,
Yeah.
it's hard to get to that, self-actualization or worrying about loving each other, and it's hard to do. It's not impossible, but it sure is difficult when you're worrying about kind of the essentials of how do I survive the next day. It's difficult to build those relationships.
Well, and I think we can display a great degree of insensitivity when we don't recognize that. Watching celebrities say from their Instagram feeds that just learn the guitar and learn Mandarin. Now's the perfect time. That's awesome if you've got stocks.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, I say that now is not if you've got stocks because the stock market's collapsing.
Yeah.
But no, that's great if you've got millions of dollars in the bank and you know that right now you can ride out a 6-month furlough with no income and know that you're going to be perfectly fine. That's great. For some of us, paying bills is a nerve-wracking endeavor.
Yeah.
So here's you talked about prioritizing these things. Can you talk a little bit to me about functionally how would you do that? So if you're sitting with a family, if they're here today and you said, "Oh, and we want you to prioritize shelter, food, utilities, and transportation." Logistically, what do you mean? What is this for people who've not done this consciously?
The most important thing, I think, is to get in front of a lot of these issues that you may run into. If you have a mortgage and you're having a hard time, if you've lost your job and you have a mortgage, you're having a hard time thinking about how do I make the next mortgage payment, you need to get in contact with your mortgage company. Folks are willing to work with you right now, but you can't let it happen to you. You've got to get in front of it, and you have to say, okay, be proactive and get in front of it and talk to the mortgage company. If you're a renter and you can't pay your next rent, you got to talk to your landlord and say, hey, this is the situation I'm in. Don't let things happen to you. You got to get in front of it. The same thing is true if you have a car loan. Talk to the car loan lender and explain to them what your situation is. You are not the only person in this situation. There's lots and lots of folks who are going through the exact same thing, and and the folks that are in the position of being the lender, they understand this and they're going to work with you. The terms may not necessarily be what you're looking for, but at least have a conversation with the folks that you owe money to. And the second thing is make sure that you have money for food. Right now they are, according to the latest thing that's been in the news, is that we are not doing any foreclosures right now, and so after you've talked to the lender, after you talk to your landlord, make sure you have enough money for food, and make sure that your family is taken care of, and that's the priority right now is to just take care of your family as the best you can, and get in front of the situation and be proactive and not be reactive in how you deal with the people that are going to be your creditors.
One of the reasons that I so appreciate that idea is I think there's an element, and I know I tend to speak in psychology terms about everything, so I apologize if I'm doing that here, but I think it's so counter to our natural tendencies to want to pick up the phone and call somebody to say we can't pay a bill. Generally speaking, the two ways we handle bills are we pay them or we don't, but we're not prone, for whatever reason, to reaching out and asking for help, or to calling to say specifically, I don't have the money for this bill, can you work with me? Or I don't have the money for this, whatever. And so I say that because I cannot stress enough how much I agree with what you said in terms of pick up the phone, call your mortgage lender, call the whatever bill it is you're struggling with, whatever the circumstances are, confront it head on. in my experience, and you can speak to this from yours, but in my experience, companies are generally way more flexible than we believe them to be. So I'm going to give you a weird story. I'm assuming that our Eastridge podcasts are not going to like a global audience, so I don't mind giving away some personal information, right? So I am one of the few people in the world who still has cable television. Not really cable, I have DirecTV. The reason I have DirecTV, the reason I've had it for years, is because we live in a place, as you know, you've been to my house a few times, we don't have internet access. Like there's no internet option at our house, which again, it's like living in the 1800s. But if I want to watch TV, it has to be with a provider. So we've had DirecTV forever. Our DirecTV, we have a pretty good package, and we pay like very little. It's less than $100 a month for what we pay, which compared to what we've got is a lot. Now here's why I tell you this story. I tell you that story because my dad also has DirecTV and has a similar package to us, but pays twice what we pay. Yeah. And now here's the funny part. The funny part is he asked me once. He was like, "Now, why do you still keep this? I feel like they're ripping me off." And I said, "Well, I don't feel like they're ripping me off because we call every year or two and tell them we're leaving." He was like, "Well, what good's that going to do?" I said, "Because it's amazing how flexible they are in their pricing when they feel like they're about to lose a customer." So we've called every year when it's time to when our contract renews. We've called every year to say, "What can you do for me?" Yeah. It's amazing how now, granted, that's not the same situation we're in now, where we may not have the money to pay, but you would be amazed at our ability to pick up the phone and call people at what they might be willing to do for us.
Yeah, and that's a great point of, if you look around and you really kind of take a look at your budget, and that's one thing that also maybe kind of seems a little counterintuitive to talk about budgeting when if you've lost your job, but you really kind of have to think about where every penny of your money goes, and really think about what is it that you're spending your money on, and prioritize in terms of, do I, if I have, for example, DirecTV, or if I have a phone service, if I have a cell service, how critical is that? Do I really need that? Or is it something I can do without for the time being, as we're trying to, process through and navigate through this time?
Man, okay, so if I can speak to that from a kind of a macro perspective, I think what you're saying is differentiate between a want and a need in a very intentional way.
Right.
So a want and a need 3 months ago looked very different than it does now. So I do video content every week for the chapel class, and I actually talked about that this past week. I talked about the fact that if there's ever been a time in our culture where we can redefine need, now is the time. I'm seeing so many things that I thought we need. I'm air quoting. You can't see it on the podcast. I'm air quoting things I thought we needed that we don't need. We don't need DirecTV. I have learned that in the last 2 weeks. I have learned that the things that we prioritize, we've prioritized out of a place of comfort. And if you change the economics, need is a very flexible word.
Yeah, absolutely. And really have a conversation. If you have a family, if you're a part of a couple, have a conversation between you and your spouse to say, what is it that we really need in order for this household to keep functioning, in order for us to kind of make it through the next 3-6 months, whatever that may be. What is it that we really need during this time? And focus on that, and make sure every single penny of your resources go towards what you need, and none of it goes towards the wants. The wants are great, and
later,
and having things that you want is fantastic. But if you are in a situation where, man, you just lost your job, or you just got put on furlough, having those wants is just this is not the time to try to get those wants right now. You really have to focus on what it is that you need for your family in order for you guys to make it through.
Yeah. Well, so if I can reiterate that in a way that, for me, I guess again, my brain thinks in terms of family stuff. This moment is going to be stressful, and it's going to be anxiety-inducing. I think 2 weeks ago there were people who were kind of insulated from that. I don't know that anybody's insulated from that now. I think all of us are feeling pressure. We're all feeling anxiety. If there's anybody listening to my voice who has not lost a little sleep and has not turned off the news at some point and thought, holy cow, and then I don't think they're paying attention. So I say that because this is going to affect all of us. From a family perspective, this is either going to be a bonding moment or it's going to create division within the family that is going to be really hard to undo. So I'm going to talk, as of course you would have expected me to say, I'm going to talk basketball for a minute, right? Which is, of course, where you saw this conversation going.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. So you know what team I despise, but that I respect as much as any team in the world? You want to take a guess?
I'm going to guess. So you grew up in Detroit, so that means you're a Pistons fan.
I am a Pistons fan. That's true.
I'm going to guess that you despise the Celtics.
No. Okay. No. Funny that you... Okay, yes, that would be a fair guess. So would the Bulls. Now, if we're talking 80s and 90s, then yes.
Okay.
I despise those two franchises. But now, it's the Spurs.
The Spurs.
It's the Spurs because I like two basketball teams. I like the Pistons, who I grew up watching, and I like the Mavericks. I've been in Dallas for 20 years. Every time one of those two teams got beat in the playoffs in the span of like a decade, it was always the Spurs. So I don't like the Spurs, but you know what I respect about them? As a franchise, everybody does their part. And if you watch them, now granted, it doesn't work as well without a couple of superstars as they've discovered in the last 2 years, but when you watched them play when they were at their peak, I remember watching guys like Bruce Bowen who played defense. He didn't score. There was no point in him. He wasn't a part of the offensive game. He was a defensive guy. They had, the way their system worked, you had like one or two jobs. Do your one or two jobs and the system's going to work really well.
Yeah.
But don't try to do all the other jobs. All right, I say that because right now, in terms of your family, there was a reason I brought up the Spurs. In terms of your family, do your job. And here's what I mean. Having this conversation about how can we all help. For one family member, maybe it's, I'm going to give up this one expense that's mine. I'm going to offer that to the family. Let's get rid of that expense. That's how I can do my part. Maybe for another one, it's going to say, well, I cook a lot, and I'm happy to keep trying to get creative and trying to cook more so that we don't have to go out. Yeah. Maybe one person is, and this is the way it is in my house, one of us is better at managing bills and keeping a structured organizational. It doesn't really matter which one of us it is, Wenzen, who's better at that. But I will say I do have a very creative brain, which is not always conducive to structure. And so I married someone who is a very organized person.
Creative bill paying is probably not a good thing.
Creative bill paying has not worked to my advantage in the past. But I say that because what we've been able to do is she can offer some of the organizational stuff. I can offer some of the outside of the box thinking. We can utilize our strengths, play to our abilities, and then work together as a family for everyone to do their part. Yeah. It is not my son's job to make money to pay the bills. It is not their job to figure out what expenses we can cut. You know what it is their job to do? To understand that we can't go to the donut shop this morning like they asked. Yeah. And to be okay with that. That is literally the extent of their job right now, is to be happy and to be okay with the choices that we're making.
Yeah, and that's a great point of a family kind of working together. And if you take that concept and kind of expand it up a little bit, you know, our family as believers, fellow believers, our family is not just the immediate folks that live with me in my household. We have a huge family. And within that context, there are many jobs as well. And one of the jobs that within this larger Christian family is that the folks that are able to can provide assistance for the folks that need it. And within that role, within that we also have our roles to play. There are givers and there are receivers. Yeah. And it is difficult for folks that have the means and ability to extend help if we don't have people that are willing to accept that help.
Absolutely.
And so in the context of each one of us having a role, I think it is a challenge a lot of times for us to have the humility to go out there and to say, be willing to say, I need some help during this time. Yep. And so that's actually a part of that is a role for a lot of folks right now to say, I need assistance and I need help to get through this period, and without any sense of embarrassment, without without
No judgment.
weakness. Yeah, without saying, the judgment of weakness or anything like that. It is to say, during this time, my family and I are going to need some help. And that is actually, that's God designed for the church. If you look if you look at the New Testament church, they shared everything that they have in common. People that had the means and abilities to help were willing to do that, and people who needed help were willing to accept the help. And I think that's going to be really, really important as we move forward, for folks that need some assistance to kind of set aside that, our culture really values kind of individualism, right? Our culture really values this, hey, I can go out there, I can take care of it myself. To set that aside and to say, I need some help, and be willing to ask for that help and receive it.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. I had a conversation actually this morning. I had a conversation. I'm doing a lot of telecounseling right now, and I had a conversation between one of those sessions where I had been texting back and forth with somebody, gave them a call, and in the course of the conversation, it became obvious that this is a person who is not able to pay bills right now, and was struggling mightily, but was not going to say that. And the reason for that is because we've got this opinion of unemployment or of being out of work as though there's some sort of a personal stigma, as though it's because you've done something wrong. And because of that, right now, it's more important than ever for us to be saying out loud, 10 million people applied for unemployment in the 2 weeks prior to last week.
Yeah.
10 million. Those 10 million people weren't unemployed because they didn't show up to work.
Right.
They weren't unemployed because they were performing poorly and got fired. Nobody picked this. Nobody chose. There are small business owners I had a conversation recently with a guy who owns a restaurant here locally, who restaurant's has been doing phenomenally well for years, and now is not, and guy may be out of work and in a lot of debt based on what's going on right now.
Yeah.
But it's not a character issue. It's not a choice issue. It's not a judgment issue.
Right.
It's just the nature of the beast right now.
It is. This is truly unprecedented. The way we have responded to this particular pandemic. Of just shutting basically the entire economy down, and to say, okay, everyone's going to stay home then, and again, this is unprecedented, and having lots and lots of folks be out of work and having no income, coming into the household. It is really, we've never experienced anything like this as a country.
No.
I was just reading that the unemployment recently was bigger than what it had been during the Great Depression.
The projected numbers.
Yeah, that's crazy. To think that in just a matter of a month, we've gotten to a place where the economy was humming, everything was going fine, and all of a sudden we're in the dumps now. And
10 million, man. 10 million people.
Yeah.
10 million people. That was insane. That number, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
The highest single week prior to that was 636,000.
Right.
And 10 million in 2 weeks.
Yep. It is unbelievable. And so it is folks that are going through this and experiencing some stress and experiencing the uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen next. They're not alone. I mean, there are lots and lots of people that are going through the exact same thing. Yeah. And as the church, as the body of Christ, it's our responsibility. It's that's what God called us to do, is to go out and care for folks that are in situations like that. And it's hard for us to do that if we don't know about their situation. So that's the asking for help is, I think it's going to be a really important thing, to put aside the ego and the pride and whatever shame, whatever the emotions that may come with that, and to just be willing to say, hey, I need some help here.
So I, as an employee of a church, I'm worried about the amount of people here. As a staff member and as a minister, there's so much need. that I, of course, like anybody else, I'm worried about what this looks like. However, there's something that I think kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying that I would like to be sure that we've said out loud. In the first week or two after this, really first couple of weeks after this, you could see visibly, even in our contribution numbers, you could see people were worried.
Yeah.
And they were reluctant to give away the money they had for fear of what's coming next, which I completely understand.
Absolutely, yeah.
The benevolence number was heartwarming to me.
It was the way this congregation came through last, I guess, fifth Sunday.
In the middle of this.
Yes, in the middle of all this, in the middle of this economic downturn, the willingness of our members to give, and sacrificial giving is what we're talking about here.
Did we publish the number?
We did not yet.
Are we ready to publish the number yet?
I'm not
still
sure
getting
about
there?
that. Yeah, we're still
Okay.
getting there. We're still trying to finalize some things there.
I've seen the preliminary numbers, and they're very encouraging and very heartwarming.
Yeah.
I will tell you that I was very surprised, because my thought was, in the middle of this, of course, people are going to be reluctant to give in this way, and then to see for benevolence, specifically because if you're listening to this and you're a member of the Eastridge family, you may know this, but just so I've said it, in case you don't, or in case you're listening from somewhere else, the Eastridge family, when there is a fifth Sunday, we take the entire contribution, every penny of that contribution. None of it goes to building or salaries or maintenance or any of that stuff. All of it goes to a specific cause. This month just coincidentally happened to be benevolence, which is our ability to provide resources for people in need. And the amount of money that was given to help people in need right now blew my mind. And I was very, very encouraged.
Yeah, it was, that is God at work right there. That is God at work. And I think we have lots of folks within our congregation that are in a position to help. And we have lots of folks in our congregation who are in the position that they need help, which is great.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're gonna be able to identify the folks that need help.
Yeah.
If your family is one of them, then let us know. Call the church office, holler at an elder, let us know, and we can get that help to you. But we can't help unless we know that the need is there.
Okay, so you're answering my last question. My last question of the day was, we spent the last 26 minutes now encouraging people. I told you this goes faster than you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we've been encouraging people to be okay saying out loud that they need help. We've been encouraging people to encourage each other, but to more than anything else, think about in tangible terms where they're at, and then ask for help. How do we do that? So if you're listening to this and think, okay, fine, I'll ask for help. How do we do that? I'll give my answers to that question are: call the office, email a minister or an elder. All of our contact information is on our website, eastridge.cc. If you want to know where to start, if you are coming from a place of having never done this before, literally pick any of those people, send an email to one of us saying, here's what I need, and trust your information will be kept confidential. We're not going to broadcast your need unless that's something that you feel compelled to have us do, in which case we'll find a way to do that. But to email us directly, call us directly, contact us so that we can be the boots on the ground in order to facilitate the help that you need. What am I missing?
I think you covered it all. The website's a great resource. Go to eastridge.cc. You can call the phone number that's listed there, and I think at this point you can probably leave a message, but that's fine. Or if you rather send an email to one of the ministers, to one of the elders, all our contact informations are listed there as well. Right. And then once that has been sent out, we'll get the ball rolling from there.
Okay. I think that's also, by the way, just making sure we're making mention of the fact that we do have a food pantry. We've got some resources here for the people who need it. But even if we don't, we can help connect people. You mentioned, and I think it's a powerful reality. You mentioned the fact that we've got people who are in a position to help and people who need help. Where I've viewed our role as shepherds and ministers right now is to tend to the souls of all involved. But in the process, helping connect the people who can from the people who need, to ensure that those lines are open and that they are as productive as they can possibly be. So if you are struggling today and you don't know what to do next, I would encourage you to give us as a church family the opportunity to love you and to minister to you in a way that I believe God intended for this church to look.
Yeah, and it really is giving others an opportunity to serve you, and that's a hard thing to do. If you remember the account of the Last Supper when Jesus, started washing his disciples' feet.
Yeah.
That act of sacrifice there, the act of service. Well, that's not possible unless the disciples were willing to allow that to happen to them. And when he came to Peter, Peter said, "No, not me, Lord, because I don't want you to do this for me." But part of our Christian walk with God is allowing others to serve us when we need that.
Man, I as a therapist, I want to help lots of people, but I can't if they won't let me, or if they won't be honest about what the need is, and they won't be willing to ask for help. I can't track people down. I can't chase people through the hall and say, "Hey, I think something might be wrong with you. You need to tell me." If I did, I would imagine it wouldn't go well, wouldn't be received real well.
Right.
I think the same thing is true for financial needs and for these needs right now. There are people ready and willing to help, but we can't do that if we don't know that you need it. Please don't suffer in silence. Please. Now is not the time for stoicism.
No.
Now is the time for love. And now is the time for us to show each other the love that we have been talking about showing each other for a long time. You're going to hear me talk about this in the chapel class content this week, but we talk a big game. As Christians, we talk a big game. Now is the time to see whether we mean it.
Exactly.
I think we do,
yeah.
but I don't think we can show that if people aren't willing to give us those opportunities.
Right. I agree with you.
Any closing thoughts?
Take care of your family. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your family. That's the biggest thing right now. Is all those other things bills, financial worries and so forth. They're there, but the most important thing right now is to focus on taking care of your family, making sure their needs are met, physical needs, emotional needs. Take care of them.
Great.
Love each other.
Great. All right. Well, listen, Eastridge family, we love you. We're thinking about you. You're in our thoughts. You're in our prayers. You're in our phones too. So utilize that. I am anxious to see you again, and I am desperately hoping that is soon, because my extroverted brain needs the socialization.
I understand.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you soon.